Let me take you into a quiet room for a moment. Not a noisy one. Not the kind where everyone is talking, scrolling, rushing. But a room where an elderly parent sits and quietly wonders, why do my children call less now? Why do they seem distant even when they are near? Did I do something wrong, or is this just how life becomes? And today, I want to gently talk about something we often avoid. The truths your children are hiding from you after 70 and why it matters more than you think. Not because they don't love you, but because love in modern life often becomes silent. Let's walk through this together. When your children say, I am busy, it is very easy for the heart of a parent to hear only distance in that sentence. It can feel like rejection dressed as responsibility. But the truth is far more layered than what the ear captures. Yes, they are busy, but not in the way older generations understand busyness. Their busyness is not always about physical work alone, it is about mental fragmentation. Their mind is not sitting in one place anymore. It is divided into 10 tabs open at the same time: office deadlines, school schedules of children, bills, health concerns, social expectations, and emotional fatigue they cannot fully name. In earlier times, work ended when one returned home. Now, work follows them into their pockets, into their phones, into their sleep. So, even when they are sitting at dinner, part of their mind is still answering an email. Even when they are physically present, their attention is emotionally stretched elsewhere. But there is another truth, more delicate than busyness. Sometimes, I am busy becomes a safe sentence, a protective sentence, because explaining the full truth is harder. Saying I am exhausted feels vulnerable. Saying I am overwhelmed feels like failure. Saying I am emotionally drained feels like burdening the parent they still want to protect. So instead, they choose a socially acceptable truth: I am busy. Not because they don't love you, but because they don't know how to carry both their struggle and your expectations at the same time. And here is something even deeper. Many children today are silently battling the pressure of being successful enough. They are trying to prove themselves in a world that constantly measures worth through achievement. In that race, even love becomes scheduled rather than spontaneous. So when they delay a call, postpone a visit, or respond briefly, it is not always absence of love. Sometimes it is presence of overload. But from the parent's heart, it can still feel like emotional distance. This is where misunderstanding quietly begins. Because one side is trying to survive the pressure of life, and the other side is trying to interpret silence through the lens of love. And both are hurting just in different languages. Understanding this does not remove the pain of distance, but it softens its meaning. It transforms they don't care into they are, carrying too much. And that shift alone can protect the heart from unnecessary loneliness. One of the most silent transformations that happens in a child's life after adulthood is this: they stop sharing their struggles openly with their parents. Not because the bond weakens, but because the role changes. When they were young, you were their shelter. They ran to you with every problem, every fear, every failure. You were their emotional home. But as they grow older, something subtle shifts. They begin to see you not just as a parent, but as someone they must now protect emotionally. So even when life becomes heavy, they hesitate. A failed opportunity at work, they may not tell you. A relationship tension, they may hide it. Financial pressure, they may downplay it. Not because these things are small, but because they don't want to add weight to your life. There is also another silent fear. If I tell them, will they worry too much? So instead of sharing pain, they carry it quietly. And over time, this creates an invisible emotional distance. The parent still feels love, but not visibility. They sense something is off, but they are not invited into the inner world anymore. But here is the paradox: your children still deeply desire your emotional support. They still want to be understood. They still want someone to say, it's okay, I am with you. But adulthood teaches them independence before emotional expression. So they learn to function, not to share, to solve, not to express, to handle, not to lean. And this is where a quiet loneliness begins to form in many adults, not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of not being fully known. For parents, this can feel like being left out of a life they once fully belonged to. But for children, it is often an act of protection, not rejection. They are not hiding life from you because they don't trust you. They are hiding it because they don't want your heart to carry weight that they believe is theirs to carry alone. And sometimes the strongest form of love they know in adulthood is silence. But silence, even when born out of love, can feel like distance. Understanding this helps soften judgment and open space for gentler connection, where children feel safe enough to slowly share again, without fear of burdening the people they love most. Guilt is one of the most unspoken emotions in adult children's hearts. It does not always show itself through words. It shows itself through delay, avoidance, and silence. When they miss a call, there is a small sting of guilt. When weeks pass without a visit, there is a quiet discomfort. When they remember you late at night, there is a soft emotional ache. But here is the complexity: guilt does not always translate into action. Instead, it sometimes creates avoidance, because calling you reminds them of what they are not doing. Visiting you reminds them of time they are not giving. Speaking to you opens a mirror they are not always ready to look into. So instead of relieving guilt, interaction sometimes intensifies it. And so they postpone, not out of disrespect, but out of emotional discomfort. Many children also carry an invisible standard in their mind: I should be doing more for my parents. But life does not slow down to match that standard. And in the gap between intention and reality, guilt quietly grows. Yet, expressing this guilt is not easy. Saying I feel like I am not doing enough for you feels heavy. It feels like admitting failure. So instead, they say lighter things. They send gifts instead of words. They make promises instead of conversations. But guilt without expression does not disappear, it transforms. Sometimes into distance, sometimes into awkwardness, sometimes into reduced communication. And ironically, the more they care, the more they may withdraw, because care becomes emotionally loaded. For parents, this can feel confusing. If they feel guilty, why don't they come closer? But guilt does not always bring closeness. Sometimes it creates emotional pressure that makes closeness harder. What children often need in such moments is not correction but relief. A sense that they are still loved even when they are imperfect in presence. Because the moment guilt turns into acceptance, connection becomes easier again. And sometimes the most healing sentence a parent can offer is not "you should come more often," but simply, "I understand life is heavy. I am here when you can be here." That kind of emotional space reduces guilt, and where guilt reduces, connection naturally returns. Even after growing into adulthood, many children still carry a quiet emotional thread from childhood: the desire not to disappoint their parents. This does not disappear with age, it only changes shape. When they were young, disappointment was about marks, behavior, or achievements. As adults, it becomes about life choices, success, stability, and comparison. Even if parents never directly compare. Then, children often carry imagined expectations in their mind. They ask themselves, am I doing well enough in life? Are they proud of me? Do they think I could have done better? These questions are rarely spoken but often deeply felt. Because for many children, parental approval is not just validation, it is emotional grounding. It is the silent assurance that says you are okay even in your imperfection. When they feel they are not meeting expectations, real or imagined, they sometimes avoid deeper contact. Not because they don't want connection, but because they fear judgment, even subtle. And so, instead of long conversations, they offer short updates. Instead of emotional openness, they offer practical communication. Instead of vulnerability, they offer performance, showing only the stable version of themselves. But inside, there is often a quiet longing. I wish I could just be seen without being measured. The fear of disappointing parents can also make children overcompensate in other areas of life: work, status, achievements, while emotionally withdrawing at home. Because home is where expectations feel most personal. For parents, this can feel confusing. We never demanded so much, so why are they distant? But sometimes expectations are not spoken, they are perceived. A tone, a comparison, a past remark, a cultural habit. Even silence can sometimes be interpreted as expectation. And so, children live with an internal pressure that they carry silently. What they often need most is not evaluation, but reassurance. Not correction, but acceptance. A simple acknowledgement like "I am proud of the person you are," not just what you do, can dissolve years of silent pressure. Because when fear of disappointment reduces, emotional closeness naturally increases. Modern adulthood often feels like living in two parallel lives at once. One is visible, structured, organized, and outwardly functional. The other is invisible, emotional, chaotic, internally complex. Your children move between these two worlds constantly. In the outer world, they are expected to be competent, calm, and productive. They attend meetings, meet deadlines, manage responsibilities, and present themselves as capable individuals. But in the inner world, they may be dealing with uncertainty, emotional fatigue, identity questions, and unresolved stress that no one sees. Switching between these worlds requires emotional energy. And over time, that switching becomes exhausting. So when they come home or speak to you, they often choose the stable version of themselves. Not because they are fake, but because they want to preserve your perception of them as strong and okay. Because parents often represent emotional grounding and they don't want to shake that ground. But this creates a quiet gap. The parent sees stability, the child feels complexity, and the two experiences do not fully meet. This mismatch can create emotional misunderstanding. Parents may feel they are fine, just distant. But the child may be thinking, I am barely managing, but I don't want to show it. Over time, this becomes emotional compartmentalization, love in one box, struggle in another. But humans are not meant to live divided for too long. It creates internal pressure, and pressure eventually expresses itself as withdrawal or emotional fatigue. What children often need is a space where they don't have to switch versions of themselves, where they can be both strong and struggling without fear of being misunderstood. Because when they feel safe enough to be whole, not divided, connection becomes more real. And real connection is not built on perfection, it is built on honesty. One of the most important truths to understand is this: love has not disappeared, it has evolved. Many parents feel emotional distance and assume love has reduced. But often, love has simply changed its language. Earlier, love was expressed through presence, sitting together long conversations, shared meals, physical closeness, and time without distraction. Today, love is often expressed through functionality, sending money, checking in briefly, solving problems, ensuring comfort, and managing responsibilities. It may not look emotional in the traditional sense, but it is still deeply rooted in care. A child paying for a parent's needs silently is also love. A quick message saying, Did you eat? Is also love. A tired call after a long day is also love. But because expression has changed, interpretation becomes difficult. Parents may miss the emotional warmth they once experienced. Children may assume practical care is enough expression. And in this gap, misunderstanding grows. But love in modern life is often compressed, not reduced. It has less time, less space, but not necessarily less depth. The challenge is that emotional languages are not always inherited across generations. Each generation learns to express care differently based on their environment. For children today, survival often requires efficiency, so love becomes efficient too. But beneath that efficiency, the emotional bond still exists. And if both sides can gently adapt to each other's expression styles, connection does not weaken, it matures. Because love was never meant to be measured only by time spent, but also by intention behind actions. And when intention is seen clearly, even small gestures begin to feel meaningful again.